Shalom, 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 brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters, this is your brother, ThePreceiptofYAH, Priest ThePreceiptofYAH from MalachiMinistries.org. And I want to do something very special for those of you. This is your first time viewing us and first time visiting the website. I want to do something very special for you. If you would send us a love offering, I want to send you a special gift. I'm going to send you a special gift. Okay, any love offering of your size, whatever you choose, I will send you a special gift, okay, from my heart. And there are a bunch of lessons that I've done in the archives of Malachi Ministries, and I want to send you a sampler CD of many of the varied teachings that we have done down through the years that has not been made available to anyone. And so I'm going to show you just a slight clip of this, and you can see exactly what we're going to give to you and for your love offering or your gift of love to this ministry. Now, having said that, I want to go ahead and get started. I want to do something very special. This particular lesson that I want to do is understanding the Bible. How often have we become inquisitive to getting to know the Bible and understanding what is this Bible all about? Because we have a lot of people that have become religious from this book called the Bible, okay? But now, we need to get an understanding, and it is my desire to try to bring a level of understanding as pertaining to the Bible, because it's been made out to be a religious book, and so people look at it as a book of do's and don'ts versus a manual or an instruction manual for the creation to show us how we can maximize our life here and get the most out of what the Father, the Creator himself, put us on the earth to do. So often do I run into people, and when they hear me talk different than what they're used to, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, what religion are you, right? So I want to just begin by saying, let's get an understanding of what this Bible and what the plan of the Heavenly Father is and has always been. What I would like to call or classify as the precept of the Creator. The Creator has a precept for his creation, and so we want to deal with that. So let's do that by beginning and by going to the book of Genesis, the very first chapter of the book of Genesis. So let's go to Genesis chapter 1. And I have a different, I have computerized Bible, and I also have the manual, a hand Bible. Okay. So I'm going to be probably interchanging between the computer version and the actual manual Bible as the need demands. Okay, so let's go to Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to just kind of lay a foundation for what this Bible is all about. Like I said, once again, I don't want to be repetitious, but we have been made to accept the Bible as a book of religion, a book of do's and don'ts, because if you do this, you're going to die, or you're going to go to hell, and that kind of thing. Versus looking at this Bible or this manual for living as an instruction book to help us to do what? To maximize our life here on the earth. So let's go to Genesis chapter 1. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but I'm going to kind of piece. This is not an exegesic of Genesis verse by verse study, so I may move around a little bit as we get to the point that we're trying to make, because this is an actual spirit inspired lesson that I'm doing without any footnotes, without any notes at all. So this is kind of what is in my heart to do. So if you would just follow along with us. Okay, now Genesis chapter 1, I will read the very first verse, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 says, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. Now, for your learning, I'm going to try my best to educate you and to teach you according to precept and not according to what has traditionally have become known as a Bible. What am I trying to say? What has become known as a biblical reference. And that's not what I'm trying to say. But what has become known, what has become the norm, I should say, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So I want to bring you a precept versus what has become the norm. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. Now, so it says in the beginning. Now we have in the Hebrew, I don't want to go into great depth, a great detail, but this word God, right? The Bible, as we're going forward and laying the foundation for the plan of the Creator for His creation, the scriptures that we know of as the Bible or the Holy Bible, and there are a lot of terminologies that we use that we need to research those terminologies. But for this lesson, I'm just going to deal with the common terminologies that we have become familiar with. Okay. So when we say this word God, right? If you are a student of the Bible and you are one that are interested in learning the precept, we want to deal with precepts, and we want to look at these scriptures from its precept of the original idea. Okay. Now, I want to alarm some of you that are viewing this to let you know that the Bible was not originally written in English. Okay? Just in case you didn't know, many of you already know, but some people have this tendency to believe or to come to accept that whatever you read in the Bible is what it is. Okay? And sometimes when we read something, right, we get a different meaning by reading what it is versus reading what it was. So when we're talking about precepts, right, we're talking about the original idea, okay, or what has been the original thought, right? Now, by way of definition, I want to offer you the definition of the word precept so we can kind of lay a foundation for what I mean when I say precept. Okay. So let's go and look in Webster's dictionary. The word precept, by definition, it says to command, pro-e, before, and capio, to take. In a general sense, any commandment or order intended as an authoritative rule of action, but applied particularly to commands respecting moral conduct. It says the 10 commandments are so many precepts for the regulation of our moral conduct. So, and it says here in meaning number 2, it says in law, a command or a mandate in writing. Okay, so that is the definition of Webster's definition of what a precept is. Now, what I want to do is I want to use another source for precept, and we're going to use another dictionary. Now, I happen to use the Macintosh or Apple computers, and there's a dictionary on the Apple computers. Okay? According to the Apple dictionary, the definition for precept is a general rule intended to regulate behavior or thought. So, a general rule intended to regulate behavior or thought. It says the commissioner issued precepts requiring the companies to provide information. So a precept, it gives us, precept is from the late Middle English, from the Latin preceptum. It says neuter past participle of this word I can't pronounce. Okay, so now the precept is the rule intended to regulate behavior or thought. The rule intended to regulate, okay? The rule intended to regulate behavior or thought. Now, before I go further, I want to take you to a place where we see the word precept, okay? So let's go to Isaiah chapter 28. Okay, Isaiah chapter 28, and let's start at verse Isaiah chapter 28, and let's start at verse 9. Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Okay, now notice what he says here. He says, whom shall he teach knowledge, right? Okay, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Okay, and that's what our whole desire in picking up this Bible is, so that we might understand doctrine and have what? Knowledge. Okay, it said, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk. So we've got to be weaned from the milk and graduate to the meat, right? Now, we know that in the New Testament, there's someone quoted that, I forget which one it was. Was it Peter or was it Paul? One of them, one of the two. And he said that he desired, I think it was Paul, talked about you are yet on milk, but you should be on meat. Okay? Now, but so here he says, them that are weaned from milk and drawn from the breast. See that? Them that are weaned from milk. Now I'm going to give you a little Hebrew word here. Okay. Them that are weaned from milk, right? It is the Hebrew gamal, which means to treat a person well, that is benefit to requite by, the implication of toil or ripen. That is to wean. Okay. Now, if we go look at wean by way of definition, wean means accustom an infant or other young mammal to food other than its mother's milk. So that's what he's saying. To be weaned, right? To be weaned from milk, or to be to be accustomed. It says accustom someone to managing without something on which they have become dependent on. So a person that is weaned from milk is weaned from that in which we have depended on. Now, many of us have so many dependencies, and I don't want to go off into drugs, but people have dependencies on drugs and chemical substances and all of that. But when it comes to spirituality, many times we have a reliance and dependability on other spiritual leaders, that we should be at a place in our life now where we don't really have to sit and ask the pastor or ask the preacher or the teacher or whoever, but that we should be so much spiritually connected and in tune with the Creator that we'll know exactly what the Creator is saying to us in our lives for the betterment of our life on earth. And that's what it really boils down to. It boils down to the betterment of our life on earth. It has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with religion, but it has to do with the betterment of life of us on earth. And now I'm going to go back to Genesis, because I want to see that this is what we have to look at the Bible from a different angle now, not look at the Bible any longer as being a religious book, of do's and don'ts, but as a manual for life. Before I get there, I want to kind of lay this foundation. So let me get back before I go too far in this lesson. Okay, now, so he says, them that are weaned from milk, and he says drawn from the breast. In other words, that's the word atik in Hebrew, which means to be removed, weaned. Also, it says anticu. So him that is drawn from a wean, or drawn from the breast. See that? So we have now grown up to a place where we now are an adult, to where we look at life from a different pair of glasses now. We don't look at the instruction manual as a hindrance or as a punishment for the things that we love to or enjoy to do, but we look at it as an instruction manual that shows us what things that the Creator has empowered us to do, so that we can do what? We can maximize life. Now, let me say this here before I go further. The way in which we have learned, we are starting to see that it is failing us, because if you gain things in this world the way in which the wisdom of the world have given us, it will fade away. Because why? It is not done primarily the way that the Creator has designed it to be done. So it runs out. Now, I done said a whole mouthful there, and I done said a whole lesson just in that statement there, but I'm trying to stay in focus with where I'm going with this lesson. Okay. All right. We'll probably get there eventually, but let me get back. So he says, them that are weaned from the milk, Isaiah 28:19, and drawn from the breast. Now, verse 10. For he says, precept must be upon precept, right? Now, precept is the Hebrew word sav, okay? Which it says an injunction. So by way of definition, what is an injunction? Okay? An injunction is, it says, the action or process of inducing someone to a position or organization. Okay? So it is the process of inducting someone to a position. So that's what an injunction is. A precept, an injunction, is the instruction that the Father, the Creator of heaven and earth, gave to his creation to do what? For the purpose of what? Inducting us into a position. Okay? What is that position? We're going to get to that position, but I want to lay foundation to this particular teaching. Okay? So now we find the precept is, it says an injunction, or it is an induction, inducting someone into a position, right? All right. Now, it also tells us that it says from the Hebrew word 6680, which is sava, or in the ancient Hebrew it would be pronounced sawa, which it says a primitive root, intensively to constitute, to enjoin. See, to constitute or to enjoin. So a precept is something that is to constitute or to enjoin, which it just gave us inducting someone into a position. So you're enjoining that person. So that's what that word sawa or sava means, to enjoin. So to the precept or the constitution, right, must be upon precept. And precept upon precept, line upon line. Now we have line, which is kav in the Hebrew, which is the word, it said a cord, as connecting, right? It's especially for measuring figuratively a rule as a rim, a musical string or chord. So line. So that is the chord or the musical instrument or musical string instrument which does what? Brings harmony. See that? So the precept, right, which is the instruction, which is the inducting someone into a position, has to be done according to its comparison to the way of the life that the Father, the Creator, created man to have. Okay, now, so he said, for a line upon line, line upon line, here a little, right, and there a little. So we have that word there, which means, it says, to dwindle, small. So from small we start. You know, we always say, I want to go from higher heights to deeper depths. Okay, I want to go to new levels, right? So we ought not to be spiritually, right, with our understanding and with our spiritual understanding or overstanding, if you will. We shouldn't be at the same place we were 10 years ago or 5 years ago, for that matter. We're progressing because our goal and our intent is to have the mind of the Creator and of His Son. And so as we grow closer to Him, we begin to see more of what His precept, right, or His injunction to a position entails, you see. So having that understanding, the injunction of the position that the Creator made for mankind, the closer we grow to Him, the more we know of Him. And the more, how do we know Him? We know Him by His Word, and we know Him by what? Relationship. So you can't have one without the other. All right. Now, having said that, let's go back to Genesis chapter 1. And now we're going to get this precept or this injunction into the position. So we go to Genesis chapter 1. So it says, in the beginning, Elohim, because that word there, the English word God, was originally the Hebrew word Elohim. And Elohim is defined as, it says, I'm going to read it just the way it is here, because the definition is written in English. So to get an understanding or an overstanding, if you will, we have to read it, but we have to also recognize that this word God was not the original. So when we see God, we have to question. Now that we know that God is an English word that actually truthfully has its origin in Hebrew, Gad, which means good luck and fortune or troop. That was not the original word, because Gad or God actually became an icon of worship amongst Israel, and so much so that one of the 12 sons of Israel was named Gad, which means troop. But here we're not talking about Gad or troop. We're talking about the Creator. In the Hebrew, it would be the word Elohim, which it says Elohim or the Mighty One in an ordinary sense, but specifically used in the plural, thus especially with the article of the Supreme Mighty One. Okay, so when we see that word God, right, if we don't want to speak in Hebrew and say Elohim, a good choice of word to use there would be Mighty One or authority or power. So the supreme power, the supreme authority, because that's who the Creator is. He is the supreme authority. Okay, now let's go, having that overstanding, let's go to Genesis chapter 1 and let's read it again. So in the beginning, Elohim, or the mighty power, created the heavens and the earth. So, as a part of the injunction to the position, we've got to recognize that there is one who created the heaven and the earth, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't you or yours. Okay? Now, having said that, we're going to skip down. Let's go down to the 19th. Let's go down to the 20. Let's go down to the 26th verse and let's pick it up from there. Okay, Genesis chapter 1 verse 26. And Elohim said, let us make man. Now, once again, we're reading in what? English. But now I want to point some things out because we want to deal with the precept, right? The injunction to the position, okay? Or the original thought. Okay, now, so it says, let us make is the phrase, right? Asa. It says to do or make. To do or make. Now, the us, let us is not there. So we've so commonly heard people say, well, who is the us? In the Hebrew, if we were to read this, it would say Elohim Amar. Okay, Elohim Amar, which means said. Elohim said. Elohim is plural in definition. So the implication is that Elohim said, and then he said Asa, to make man. And then we don't have in our, we have Adam, to make man, and then we have image or Salim. Okay? Salim means, it says, from an unused root meaning to shade, to phantom, that is figuratively illusion, resemblance, hence a representative figure, especially an idol. So now, so when we read that again in verse 26, it says, Elohim said, right, make man, Adam, Salim. It says with the resemblance. And then here we have another phrase, after our likeness. That is the word damuth, which means resemblance, concretely, model shape, adverbially like. And let them have dominion is another phrase, which is the word radah, which means to tread down, to subjugate, to crumble off. Over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creep upon the earth. So the thought is there in the English, and that's the reason why the translators, when they translated that particular portion of the text, they translated it, Elohim said, let us make man after our image and after our likeness. More so, he said, make man. In other words, he just spoke man into existence. He didn't have to say, let us make man. That's English. But when he said, man be, that's what actually, if you wanted to translate that properly from Hebrew to English, you would say that the Creator said, man be. And man was. He said, man, he said, Adam, be. Be what? Be a resemblance of me. So in this precept, the Creator wanted man to do what? To be like him. How is he? Eternal. How is the Creator perfect in every way? How is the Creator? He is full of wisdom and knowledge. Okay, so, and he has, like I said, I'm gonna repeat it again, he has eternal life. So in understanding that, the Creator's precept or his injunction to put you in a position was to position creation to do what? To be perfect, to be eternal, and all knowledgeable as he is. Okay, that was his precept for man. Okay, and then he said for them to have dominion, because now as he has dominion over his creation, I place man over what I've created for him to dominate, or to do what? Or it says here to dominate, to radah, to subjugate, to tread down, right? To prevail, okay, over everything that's in the air, in the sea, and that is on the land. Okay? Or in the Hebrew it says eretz, or the earth. Okay? Now, so that is the precept of the Creator, was for us to be a resemblance of him. Now that explains why he gave what people have a tendency to reject and look upon it as a bondage. But he gave a law which is actually the manual. Now think about it like this, okay? When you buy a car or something brand new, it comes with a manual, right? That manual is not designed to put you in bondage and not let you enjoy the car. That manual is given as a guide or as an instruction for you to do what? To be able to maximize the usage of that car that you just bought, to show you how to operate it, to show you how it's supposed to function, to show you how you could sustain it, how you could extend how you can protect the warranty on it, and so forth. How many times have we not followed what was prescribed in the manual, and we have voided the warranty? So therefore the vehicle has become what? The vehicle has become voided, out of warranty, because we didn't follow the instruction to maintain that vehicle. And since we didn't follow the instruction, we ended up wasting our money because we blew an engine because we didn't do the oil changes, or we didn't, our tires blew out, or our tires wore out because we didn't rotate the tires after so many thousands of miles. You see how this is working? So now, when we look at this Bible, or the scriptures, or the word of the Most High, we have to look at this as now not just being something that's bondage, but something that has been designed, right, for us to maximize this body we have, which is like the car scenario I just gave you. This is the manual to help us to maximize our life on earth so that we can live. All right. Now, having said that, I want to go to Deuteronomy, I think is where I want to go. Okay. Let's go to Deuteronomy Matter of fact, before I go to Deuteronomy, I want to read something that I just saw here, talking about live. Let's go to Numbers chapter 4. Okay, Numbers chapter 4. All right, Numbers chapter 4. Numbers chapter 4 and verse, let's start at verse 19. Let's start at verse 17. Numbers chapter 4, verse 17. All right, Numbers chapter 4, verse 17. And it reads as follows. And now, once again, since we are teaching by precept, right, we want to get things correct in its proper perspective, because once again, we have to understand or understand that the scriptures was not written in English. So we have to, and when it comes to things like names and titles and things of that nature, it's a good practice to research those names and titles, because we could be calling something that it wasn't originally called or wasn't suitable to be called. Okay, so a lot of times we've adopted pagan ways from other cultures, and they've mixed their culture with the Creator's way of doing things, which is not good. Okay, so he says, and in the King James, it says the Lord. So I want to educate you here as we read this, because I'm laying this foundation. So I don't want anybody to get lost. I want you to follow us. Please follow us, because it's very important that you follow us as we do this, so that if anybody asks you or question you about anything, you have a reference to go back to. Okay? It's not just something that some crazy person that you saw on the internet was teaching, but this is something that you can verify by using your tools, the Bible. Okay? And the tool that I'm using is the King James Bible with the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. Now, there are other Hebrew lexicons and dictionaries and analyticals and so forth that you can get, but we're going to use the simplest tool as possible to us, just to kind of lay the foundation. And as you graduate in your knowledge and so forth, then you can spend thousands of dollars and buy analytical Hebrew books and so forth and all of that. But it's not necessary to get the general practical understanding or overstanding an idea. Okay, so now, having said that, this word Lord, if you look at this word in the Hebrew, look at the word Lord, right, in the Strong's Concordance, and it will tell you, you will see it has 4 letters that the religious world has labeled or has named them the Tetragrammaton, which is a Greek phraseology, I believe, or a Latin one, which means 4 letters. Okay, so, but at any rate, wherever you see the Lord, you will see a number 3068. That is YH, or in the Hebrews, Yod He Wah. Okay, now there are tons of variations of how to pronounce that. I'm not going to go off into a battle with that. The reality of the matter is that this word Lord is a substitution. Okay, and they substituted the name of the Creator, right, and put Lord in there. Okay, because if you look at the number, they in the Strong's Concordance, what you will see, if you look, you will see they put vowel points in there and made it Jehovah, which if you look at the Strong's in itself in the Hebrew, There is no E or no O and an A in there, okay? So that's kind of adding to the Hebrew for you to understand. So commonly, what has commonly have been accepted in the circles, which is incorrect, is Jehovah, okay? Because if you read the definition, it does say from 1961, okay? And 1961 in the Hebrew is Ha-Yah. Ha-Yah. Ha in Hebrew means the, and Yah means the breath, okay? Or the life, okay? The life, the source of life. So Ha-Yah. So the word Lord was translated or substituted. It took the place of, by the translators, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, which is a combination of Hayah and Yah, or 3051. Okay? 3051, which means it says the sacred name, or it says Yah, the most vehement. Now, once again, if you read the definition, it don't say Yah in the definition. So, because we have to use the understanding or the overstanding of the knowledge that we have now, that Lord was a substitution, and every time you see Lord, we replace that with Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, or Yah, which is 3050. And we have also 3069, okay, which is another repetition of the same four letters, or the tetragrammaton, using that very loosely, but the four letters, which is Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. Okay, now there are many various of pronunciations of that name which have caused great debates. Okay, I'm not here to debate the proper way to say the name, because the important thing is that we know that Yah is a phrase that has been given to the whole creation in the one phrase that we utilize all the time, and that is Hallelujah. Okay, now having said that, I wanted to lay that foundation. So now let's go forward. Okay, now, and Yah spoke to Moses and unto Aaron, saying, cut not off the tribe of the families of the Kohathites from among the Levites, but thus do unto them that they may live and not die. When they approach unto the most holy things, Aaron and his sons shall go in and appoint everyone to his service and to his burden. Now, so it was the Most High's intent for the priest to go to the Most High, someone who was designated. Now, I'm going to go backwards because we got there, but we got to show you how we got there. So let's go back to Genesis. We know the story. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 3. And now remember when Adam and his wife, now we're going to show you her proper name. Okay, so you can have an understanding of the name of Adam and the first mother on the earth. Okay, before we get there, Genesis chapter 3 says, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which Yah, now we know Yah is there, and Elohim is there, okay, which Yah, Elohim, had made. And he said unto the woman, yes, have Elohim, or the power, said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, the power, Elohim, have said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Okay, now we know the rest. The serpent said, you shall not surely die. you shall not surely die, he says, for Elohim does know that the day that you eat thereof, that your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as mighty ones, knowing good and evil. So now, remember now, the Most High told him in the second chapter. Let's go back, and we can go back to the third chapter. Okay, so second chapter, the Most High told Adam himself. Okay, if we go down to verse 15, Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 says, and Yah Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And Yah Elohim commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day you eat thereof you shall die. So, once again, we're talking about understanding this or overstanding these scriptures as a manual for how to live. So the original precept, the injunction to the position of life, was given to the first man here when the Creator told him not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because if you eat of that tree, you're going to die. You see that? So the Creator, the Heavenly Father, whose name we now know as Yah, created man for the purpose of doing what? Having life. Not dying, but having life. So he told him, he said, if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you're going to die. Okay? I want you to live. So because I want you to live, I'm going to tell you what to do. This is my law, or my instruction, my owner's guide for life, so that you will live. So when Adam was given the command, now go back to chapter 3, the serpent appeared to the woman and told the woman, you shall not die. And when she gave it to her husband, it says she ate. Let's skip down to verse 6. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes. See that? So the enemy, who hates the creation, and if you read in some of the lost books, it tells you that Satan, whose original name was Halel, who was created to praise the light, or the Most High, or the mighty power, he had an overstanding that man was going to be created and that he was going to have to serve man. And that's what the Malachim, who we commonly call angels, were created for, to be ministering spirits to creation, to the sons of the earth. So when Halel, or the devil, got wind of that, he didn't like that, so he attempted he was successful in causing man, the creation, to break the commandment, or the law, or the instruction for life that was given to him by the one that created him, you see. So having an understanding, now it says the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree to be desired to make one wise. So what did he do? So she saw that the tree was good. See that? The enemy will take and utilize the thing that looks good to cause us to die. You see, I have a saying that I use all the time. I say the very thing that we crave for could be the very thing that takes our life. Because why? The Creator created us to have life. That was the precept, or the instruction, or the injunction for the position of eternal life. And watch what happens here. So The enemy made it look good to the eye, the tree to be desired, so he created a taste for it. And it says, and wisdom, right? It's for her to have wisdom. Now, I want to share with you the word there is sakal, which means, it says intellect, circumspect, hence intellect. So the enemy wanted the woman to believe that she would get an intellect that in which she already had, that they both already had. So in saying that, so it desired to make one wise. It says, and when the woman saw that, okay, she took of the fruit, verse 6, Genesis 3, thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So she took and ate of the fruit. She gave the fruit to her husband, and he turned around and ate of the fruit, having given the instruction or the manual, right, which was verbal for life. He violated and he ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now look at verse 7. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked. You see, their eyes. Now I want to share this with you. Their eyes is the Hebrew word ayin. Okay, their eyes of them both, right, were open. Now open, you got to see this now, because this is going to help to bring understanding, right, or clarity, if you will. Since you don't like overstanding, I prefer to say that instead of understanding, over or clarity. So this brings clarity, okay? The word open is the Hebrew word pakah, which means, it says, a primitive root to open, and then it has in parentheses the senses. The senses, especially the eyes, figuratively to be observant. See that? So her pakah, it says that their senses. Now, by way of definition, okay, by way of definition, a sense is defined as a faculty by which the body perceives an external stimulus, one of the faculties of sight, smell, hear, taste, and touch. So, in other words, what happened here was when they ate of the fruit, they became aware of the senses. Okay? Because that word pakah means that their senses became open. They became now subject to, not to the creator, but they become now subject to the realistic world and not of the or the tangible world, I should say, because the spirit world is realistic too as well, because there was eternal life in there, but they lost that. And then they subjected themselves to temporary world, which was the world of death, right? So the precept was for man to have life, right? So you see how this is working? So now, when they ate that, their pakah, their senses, their five senses became open, and they became led now by their senses and not being led by the spirit of the Almighty, which gives light, okay? Now, because of this, the Most High said something very profound, okay? If we go to Genesis, the 3rd chapter, and let's skip down to verse 13. And Yah Elohim, now we know the name again, said to the woman, what is this that you have done? And the woman said that the serpent beguiled me. And now, verse 14, and Yah, the mighty power, Elohim, said unto the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed above all the cattle and above every beast of the field, and upon thy belly shalt you go, and dust shall you eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman. So the enmity, he said, he's going to put enmity between the serpent, right, which is the snake, and the woman. Now, the serpent was symbolic. It was a literal serpent, but it was also symbolic of the wicked one, Satan. So it was a twofold. It's a dual there. The deceiver, who knew that he was going to serve man, deceived her by doing what? Using a serpent. Okay. So he said the enmity will be between the serpent and the woman, which explains why, generally speaking, you may have some exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, the women are terrified of snakes. I mean, and if we want to go another step, even men I don't like snakes. I'm not really afraid of them, but I don't like them around me. If I see them, I'll try to get him out of my presence. And if he doesn't want to go out of my presence, then we'll deal with other measures. Okay, I'll just say it like that. All right. Now, and he said, I will put enmity between the serpent and the woman, and between the seed and her seed. So the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, right? So the seed of the woman, the literal seed, and that's why a continuation of hatred of mankind with the snakes. Okay? And then the dual part of the meaning is that I will put enmity between the seed of the serpent, the deceiver, and the seed of the woman, or the righteous seed. You see. Now, that in itself right there, the woman and her offspring, because let's look at it from, he said, I will put enmity between the woman and between her seed. So the word in Hebrew for seed is the word zarah, which means seed. Fruit, plant, sowing, time, posterity. Okay, so child. So we don't want to get off on the subject that women don't have a seed, only the man has a seed. But we understand and we understand, we have clarity now from the Hebrew that is talking about the posterity. So by way of definition, let's look up this word posterity, right? A posterity, it says all future generations of people, a descendant of a person. So a woman can have a seed in the sense that this is a descendant or her offspring or her child. So that has a trifold meaning that passes there, because we understand that literal woman and the serpent or the snake and her seed, the literal seed of the woman, her offspring, her prosperity, her child, and the serpent would have, and then the actually is fourfold meaning, and then the third meaning is the seed of the deceiver and the righteous seed, and then the fourth fold of that is the nation of Israel, which is the woman and the seed of the woman, which would be what? Those that hate the nation of Israel and who want to do what? Like it says in the Psalms, cut her off that the name of Israel might be no more. You see, so that's four. In one verse, you have four different manifestations of that same verse right there. Okay. Now, going forward, so that is why the Most High chose. Now, let me show you, since we're dealing with precepts, right? Let me show you how we know that the last part is true. Okay? Now, we know the last part is true because in Genesis, we can go to Genesis, when Joseph had a dream, right? The 27th chapter, 37, Genesis 37. It says, and he dreamed yet another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance unto me. So the 11 stars, or the 11 brothers of, here we find Joseph had a dream, right? Now, go with me to Revelation, because we're going to go to the 12th chapter, and we're going to confirm that this 12, or the seed of the woman, is literally the physical seed of Israel, which is fulfillment of prophecy, the fourfold prophecy that we just read in Genesis chapter 3. So go to Revelation chapter 12. All right, the very last book. Verse 1 says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. See that? So that confirms what we just read in Genesis 37. Okay, the woman clothed with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars, which are the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, now it says, she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, verse 3, behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew a third part of the stars from heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Okay, now I want to skip down. We know that was the fulfillment of the Messiah, who came through 42 generations, fulfilling Genesis chapter 3, the seed of the woman. Okay, watch what it says here. She was, the verse 5, she brought forth the man child who was to rule the nation with the rod of iron. Her child was caught up into Elohim and to his throne. Okay, now let's skip down. Let's go down and let's go to verse 13. Revelation 12, verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child. Right? Now, it says, was given unto, and to the woman were given 2 wings of great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for time and times and a half of times from the face of the serpent. See that? So now we see the serpent, the fulfillment of the literal serpent, which was literal snake or serpent, right? And now we see the spiritual serpent, which is, watch what he says here. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. Okay. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened his mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Now watch what he says here. Which keep the commandments of Elohim and have the testimony of Yahshua the Messiah. You see. So now, I want to go back up to, because I want you to see how we know that Genesis 3 is a confirmation, or is a prophecy speaking with regards to the serpent, which is a spiritual representation of a literal interpretation, but is actually a spiritual representation of the devil. Okay, now, so Revelation 12 in verse 9 it says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceive the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So now let's go back now and recap a little bit. So we have to get clarity that the precept or the injunction to the position for mankind was for man to do what? To live, right? To maximize life. You know, nothing's more sadder than a person who prematurely dies, right? Because they're eating improperly, not resting, overworked, get a disease, incurable disease, and they die prematurely. Why? Because we didn't look at the creator's manual, owner's manual, instruction manual as an instruction, but we were taught to look at the owner's manual as a bondage or as a religious book, and not a way of life that's designed to do what? To teach us how to live. You see, if we lived according to the manual for living, we could eliminate crime. We could eliminate death, murders, I should say. We could eliminate thefts and all of that if we lived or did according to the instruction manual. But because we don't live according to the instruction manual, and we see this manual as a bondage or a cruel testament, we're under a New Testament, then we continue to see death, murder, theft, all of the above, to escalate up above into numbers that are out of control. Look at our economy. It's out of control because the manual, the precept for living, tells us how to live so that we can do what? Maximize our life on earth as it is in heaven. Okay? Now, so prayerfully, you got something out of that particular sharing. I wanted to say more in this, and I probably will continue on this series because I want to deal with understanding or getting clarity. Before I close out, I did mention, and I want to kind of deal with the priest. I mentioned about living. Okay, so before I do that, I want to go to Exodus chapter 19 and show you why the priests were chosen, why the sons of Aaron were chosen, right? Because the prophecy said in Genesis chapter 3, the seed of the woman was going to bruise the head of the serpent. Okay, that was the precept at that particular time, because when man fell and Adam transgressed the law and named his wife Kawah, and I didn't give you that one there, but in the 3rd chapter, we'll look at that on the next lesson, the 3rd chapter, where he named her the mother of all living. And in the actual, let's just go there right quick, and then we'll go ahead and close this out about Exodus chapter 19, and we'll close the lesson there. So let me do that, since it came back to my remembrance that I needed to do that. So let's go to Genesis chapter 3, right? And we're going to show you where Adam named his wife. Okay, let's see, Genesis chapter 3. Okay, Genesis chapter 3 and verse 20. Okay, Genesis 3 and 20. And Adam in the Hebrew is Ad-am. You have two words in Hebrew: Ad, which means perpetual, Am, which means people, which confirms that the Creator originally made man to be a perpetual people, not to die, but perpetual, to live forever. So ad am. Ad means perpetual. Am means people in the Hebrew tongue. Okay. Adam called his wife's name, and it says here Eve in the English, but once again we have to have clarity and understanding that now the word Eve is from the Hebrew 2332, which is chet. Let's see if I can blow that up there. Chet wa chet, which is cha wa, which means, it says, life giver. So wah means breath giver. So her name is Hawa. Hawa. Wah. Hawa. The life giver. Okay? So Adam named her that after the flood, because why? He overstood, right, that the Most High's precept was for man to live forever. So he named his wife at his fall the giver of life, because he understood or overstood, or he had clarity that the prophecy said that the seed of the woman would bruise the heel of the serpent. He had no knowledge about an Israelite nation at that time. So he took that as a literal representation to him that her child was going to bruise the serpent's head. Okay? Now, having that understanding and that clarity, now let's go to Exodus chapter 19 as we present this portion here. So we will show you why the priesthood were chosen, because the prophecy said in Genesis chapter 3 that the seed of the woman. So we understand now that that prophecy was not literally talking about Seth. Well, technically it was, because Seth's son later on came down to Shem after the flood, and to Eber, and to Abraham, and to Isaac, and to Jacob, and to the Messiah, who was born through 42 generations. But let's go to Exodus chapter 19. I'm going to read a few verses, and then we're going to put this lesson to bed. Okay? Now, in the third month, Exodus chapter 19, verse 1, the third month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt. Now, incidentally, we'll just kind of give it to you. The word Egypt is a Greek substitution of the Hebrew word Mizraim, which means upper and lower. Okay? Now, Mizraim means upper and lower. Okay? If you go to Genesis chapter 10, in the table of nations, let me just give this to you, and then we're going to go back. Genesis 10, right? And I think verse 6. It says the sons of Ham are Cush and Mizraim. So Mizraim was the name that Ham named, or Ham, which means hot, named his son Mizraim. Okay, he didn't name him Egypt. Okay, so now, having that understanding, go back to Exodus 19 and verse 1. So when Israel were going out of the land of Mizraim, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai, or it's Sinai, and that's how you pronounce that in Hebrew. Okay, all right. Hey.
Hey, what's happening?
What's going on?
You the man. I just called, check on you, see what's going on with you.
Oh, ain't not you down this way?
No, I'm home.
Oh, okay.
Well, I know you home, right? What you doing today? Just chill.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Oh, went out. Okay, let me close this out. I'll call him back. Okay, now, so Exodus chapter 19, verse 1. Exodus chapter 19, verse 1. In the third month, when the children of Israel were going forth out of the land of Mizraim, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim, and were come to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness. And there Israel camped before the mount. Verse 3. And Moses went up unto Elohim, and Yah called unto him. Okay. Hold that thought right there.
Okay. You all right? You cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's
I talked to Ronald earlier part of the day.
Oh, yeah?
He called you.
Oh, no, what's going on?
You know, that he got this letter. You know, he got to live in North Carolina. So why is he getting a letter from the courts of North Carolina?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there a police report?